everyone, thanks for stopping by. Today in this video I wanted to share 7 tips and suggestions for if you are wanting to become a card maker. Now being a card maker is a wonderful thing, but it can be expensive. So in this video I want to share some ways that you can save money and do this hobby in a frugal and non-frustrating way. So let's go ahead and get started. The very first tip is to choose the type of cards that you want to make. Now, you can make any cards that you want, but I initially did not sit down and decide what type of cards I wanted to make. I didn't know if I just wanted to do Christmas cards, I didn't know if I wanted to do all occasion cards, and I didn't know if I wanted to sell my cards. Well, now, 3 or 4 years later, I'm finally deciding that I want to make a mix of everything and I want to be able to sell my cards. Therefore, I need to have enough stamps and supplies that I can stretch my stamps and my other supplies and create multiple designs. The second tip is to choose a color medium that you are most comfortable with. Now again, when I started card making, I just kind of bought a little bit of everything, and in 1 year I purchased an entire set of alcohol markers. I bought an entire set of distress inks. I bought some more dye inks, and I also started experimenting with watercolor. So as you can imagine, I spent a lot of money in that very first year that I primarily did card making. So I recommend that you decide if you want to start out with watercolor, alcohol markers, colored pencils, anything like that. So if you choose to do watercolor, I have some suggestions for you. So with watercolor, you can choose to do traditional watercolors either in the pans or like peerless watercolor, which I do not have, or you can choose to do something such as watercolor pencils. And now watercolor pencils are very affordable. This is a set by Derwent and I like it. It doesn't have an expansive array of colors, but there are more available. Also, the Derwent Ink Tints pencils are a great option as well. I have been using these Reeves watercolor pencils, and I have a video that use these watercolor pencils, and I will link that below so you can go check it out. And also for watercolor, you can use distress inks, and I do a lot of this, and I will be talking about distress inks pretty often in this video. So these are a great option for watercolor as well. And another great option is Tombow markers or the Zig Clean Color Real Brush Pens. I do not own those. Those are a little bit pricey, but I really do recommend the Tombow markers. These can be used for a lot of different things. So in addition to watercolor, you can also, you might be interested in alcohol markers, or if you've heard of Copic coloring, and basically Copic is just a brand of alcohol markers. Now I don't own Copics, they are way out of my price range, so I like to use these Spectrum Noir alcohol markers, and you can buy these in color families, or you can buy them in sets of, I believe, 36 to a pack. I don't own the entire collection, but I'm pretty close. So I purchased all of mine at Joann's, and I used a coupon for each different set, and I got them. I waited until I had a 60% off coupon or like a 50% off coupon, and then I purchased each set individually, and I saved a ton of money that way. And as I mentioned before, watercolor pencils are a great option, and colored pencils are a great option too. I like to use just these simple, inexpensive Reeves colored pencils, and I also use my Crayola colored pencils from when I was in high school. So use what you have, decide what you want to use. If you want to go out and buy everything, go for it. But if you want to save some money, I recommend that you just kind of start off with one color medium of your choice. The third tip is to only buy what you actually need for your card making. So no matter what type of card maker you are, if you are a stamper, if you just do paper piecing and die cutting, if you're a watercolor artist and you make watercolor cards, almost every card maker is going to need what I call the big 3, and that is adhesive, quality paper and scissors or a paper trimmer. So the very first one is adhesive. Now I pretty much always use Tombow adhesives. I use these because they're reliable. They're generally inexpensive. I don't think these are any more expensive than like the off brands or any other brands at the craft store, but they're very widely available where I live, and you can get them online in the craft store. And I also use a coupon with these when I purchase them at the craft store. I like to use a mixture of like a wet adhesive and dry adhesives, and Tombow has a nice selection of different types of adhesives. And then for your paper trimming, I use a paper trimmer. This is a Tonic Guillotine trimmer, and I recently started using this a couple months ago, and it was about $20. I ordered it on Amazon, but before that I always have used these paper trimmers by Fiskars, and this one, the arm slides out so it accommodates 12 by 12 papers. I used to be primarily a scrapbooker, so I always used something like this, and this just has the replaceable blades. And this is a great investment as well. Now, I don't use this one as much because it's a little bit bigger for what I need for card making, but these are around $20 online, at your craft store, at Walmart, so these are a great investment to have. If you have a paper trimmer, you really won't need a big pair of scissors, and I have a nice pair of Fiskars scissors, but I rarely use them. What I do use are my precision tip scissors. Now these are by We Are Memory Keepers. These came in like a kit that I bought a couple years ago, and they're non-stick, and I use these all the time to cut out images and other little intricate designs to put on my cards. And the last thing that you absolutely need is quality white cardstock. If you have quality white cardstock, you can do so much with your card designs. Now, I used to use just cheap cardstock from the craft store, and I never got the results that I wanted. I have since switched over to Neenah Classic Crest Solar White, and I will never go back. This really isn't any more expensive than what I bought at the craft store, and trust me, you will get such good results by using a quality cardstock. I will link this cardstock below and where I buy it, and I will also include some other links to some places where you can get this for a really good price. My fourth tip is to only invest or purchase the inks that you will actually need. Now, for my card making needs, I really only use 3 inks primarily on all of my cards. So the first one is just a basic black dye ink, and this one is alcohol ink friendly. Sometimes that's a mouthful to say. This is Memento Tuxedo Black. This is inexpensive. I've had this ink for about 2.5 years. I use this probably weekly. I use this in my planner as well for my planner stamps. I've never had to re-ink this. Like I said, this is safe for your alcohol markers, meaning that it won't bleed whenever you put that alcohol marker on top of it. I also use this when I do colored pencils, and I also use this for like outline stamping if I'm using other dye inks. So this is a great ink to have. Now, you don't have to get just this brand. If you're going to be using alcohol markers, this is a great one to get, but you can also get any dye ink that says that it's safe for alcohol inks. The next black ink that I use pretty much on a regular basis is VersaFine. This is a pigment ink. This is in Onyx Black, and like I said, it's just a pigment ink, and this can be used for watercolor techniques because it's waterproof, water resistant, and you can also use this for embossing. So instead of using black embossing powder, which is really messy, I just stamp my sentiment or my image that I'm wanting to emboss in black. I just stamp it onto my paper, and I apply clear embossing powder over this and heat set it, and I have a fabulous black embossed image or sentiment sentiment. I also use this for sentiments to give it a really nice, bold black impression. And like I said, I use it for watercolor techniques as well. So I'll use this with my Tombow markers, my watercolor pencils, if I'm coloring in with distress inks and like a water blending brush, I will use this ink as well. And the last ink that pretty much every card maker uses these days is VersaMark ink. Now this is a clear sticky ink and it's a watermark stamp pad, and this is primarily used for embossing. So this will grab onto that embossing powder so that you can do heat embossing with it. Now, colored dye inks are a great thing to have in your crafty stash, but they can be expensive. So if you are wanting to do some stamping with colored inks, what I highly recommend you do is to just go out and purchase several of the mini distress ink cubes. These are around $2 in the US. You can buy them online, on Amazon, all the craft stores online. You can buy them in pretty much any physical craft store, and there are so many colors of these available. And a tip that I like to do is to stamp these along with the VersaMark ink pad to create a really nice stamping effect. Now I do have a video that I will link below, and it talks about several different ways that you can use distress inks instead of just the normal ways that you would typically think about. So these are a great investment, and they're really not that expensive. Tip number 5 is to only purchase stamps that you can get multiple uses out of. Try to purchase things that have different types of sentiments on them. So this is another one from Avery Elle. This is the sentimental stamp set. Sorry, I had to look. And it just has different little different sentiments on it. And I have several stamp sets from Avery Elle that are these like long scripty images, and they really fill up a card. And you can get different types of sentiments with this type of script and this font. Now, these two stamp sets right here are my most recommended stamp sets for any card maker. I don't care what level you are, I don't care what kind of cards you make, you pretty much need these two stamp sets. These are by Concord and Ninth, and these are the sophisticated script stamp sets. Now, you can buy these together or individually. I believe you get a better deal when you buy them together, but there is an uppercase stamp set, and then there's a lowercase stamp set. And these, when you put them together, you can create any sentiment you want. And the font on these, it lines up perfectly. Each letter lines up perfectly no matter what letters you put together. And I just really, really love these stamp sets. These are the most used stamp sets in my collection, and I'm so glad I have these. I don't know what I would do without these, honestly. I also recommend when you're starting out stamping to invest in stamps that you can get the most mileage out of. So anything that is like a nature scene, so flowers or butterflies, certain animals, birds, just anything like that is a really great thing to have on hand. And I also recommend getting some floral images that kind of take up a large amount of the card. So this is a newer one from Concord and Ninth, and this is the Hello Lovely stamp set, and this floral image right here takes up pretty much an entire A2 sized card front. So you can see that if you stamp that down there on your card panel, again, this is an A2, so it's 4¼ by 5½. You can stamp this down, color it in with whatever color medium you want, and then you can just take a sentiment and stamp it right over the top, maybe on a piece of vellum, and you have a really easy but gorgeous card. So I highly recommend larger images like this. Tip number 6 is all about heat embossing. Now, you can choose if you want to do heat embossing, and most card makers nowadays do it. It isn't that expensive once you have the basic supplies that you need, and really you only need 3 types of supplies. So obviously for heat embossing you're going to need some type of heat tool. I use a Zap heat tool. I purchased this from, I want to say I got this from Amazon. It was about $13, $14, but again you can get it at all the major craft stores, and there are different brands of these. The next thing that you will need is obviously an ink to use that will adhere to your embossing powder. And like I mentioned before, I use VersaMark ink, and then I also use VersaFine ink. You can also use Pigment inks. I don't have any out to show you, but just like the VersaFine ink, a Pigment ink is like a sticky ink and it takes a while to dry, so that is perfect to use with embossing powder. Now, the next thing that you're going to need for heat embossing is obviously embossing powder. Now, I only use like 4 different colors of embossing powder on my cards. Now, I own a few more colors, but honestly, I don't use them. So what I recommend you buying if you're interested in doing heat embossing is to invest in some clear embossing powder that you can use right over the top of like this VersaFine Pigment ink, or any pigment ink for that matter, as well as white, and then gold and silver. And the last thing that you technically don't need for embossing, but I highly recommend, is an anti-static powder tool. This one is by EK Tools, and this is just a little powder tool that has kind of like a baby powder in it, and all you do is you prep the surface of your whatever paper you're going to be embossing on. You just rub it across your paper, and then you would just ink up your stamp with, let's say, your VersaMark ink pad, and then you would stamp down, you would apply your embossing powder, and then because you have this anti-static powder on your paper, the embossing powder is only going to stick to the ink on the paper. It's not going to stick to any parts of the paper where you may have had some, like a thumbprint, or maybe a little speck of something on your paper where it's going to mess up your embossing. This is inexpensive. This is only like a couple of dollars. This is under like $5, I believe, and it will save you so much frustration when you're heat embossing. Tip number 7, this is my last tip, and really it's just a suggestion, but there are no real rules to card making or crafting in general. So just do what you're comfortable with, spend the amount of money that you're comfortable with, and just remember that as long as you're happy creating the way you are creating, you know, just go with it and just have fun. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you got some ideas from this video to kind of help you either get started with card making, or even if you're an experienced card maker, maybe you learn some tips and tricks that can help you with your own card making. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.